Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about Warlight by Ondaatje, who is best known for his novel The English Patient that won him the Man Booker Prize of 1992. I think there are some similarities between Warlight and The English Patient. They both have elements of war, maps, and espionage. However, I think The English Patient is a more expansive novel with a more complex and interconnected plot, while Warlight has a more linear storyline and is about the memories of this one single character. I personally like The English Patient more, but I still think Warlight is a very good novel and definitely worth reading. Ondaatje has masterful storytelling skills and he offers some very unique perspectives on the war. The term warlight refers to the dimmed lights used during London's wartime blackouts to evade enemy detection. And much like this murky world of wartime, the novel itself is very murky. It has many shadows obscuring the true events, and is narrated from the perspective of a man looking back on his childhood, which was a time filled with disguises and secrets, as he tries to piece together what is really happening. And apart from childhood memories, there are some clues he's uncovered as an adult. And he says he knows how to fill in a story from a grain of sand or a fragment of discovered truth. However, this also means that his perspective remains subjective and unreliable. So even by the end of the story, many things remain as obscure as those dimmed warlights. The novel opens in 1945, just after the end of the Second World War. 14-year-old Nathaniel and his sister Rachel are left behind by their parents, who are supposedly going to Singapore for a year. And the very first line of this novel perfectly sums up this unsettling situation. In 1945, our parents went away and left us in the care of two men who may have been criminals. I mean, Ondaatje is really a master of storytelling, isn't he? This simple sentence provides just enough information to set the scene, but leaves much unsaid and creates a sense of suspense. The two men who are looking after the children are nicknamed the Moth and the Daughter. So we can tell that this is a family of nicknames, which also suggests it's a family of disguises. The Moth is a very mysterious figure. He is large, humble, and shy, and he said he once worked with their mother as fire watchers on the roof of a hotel during the war. And that is a term that subtly hints at some form of spy work. The Daughter, on the other hand, is a smuggler who uses a muscle boat to transport greyhounds through the black market into London for racing. So the arrangement is obviously very strange, but the narrator Nathaniel explains that life still was haphazard and confusing during that period after the war, so what had been suggested did not feel unusual. But the first disillusionment comes when Nathaniel and Rachel discover their mother's trunk hidden in the basement, still packed with the clothes and belongings they had prepared together. So obviously, she hasn't gone where she said she was. So where is she? That's something Nathaniel has been trying to figure out through his teenage and adult years. And another thing that's very odd is that their house is always filled with eccentric people who seem to be the friends of their guardians. Nathaniel describes the house as more like a night zoo, with moles and jackdaws and shambling beasts who happen to be chess players, a gardener, a possible greyhound thief, a slow-moving opera singer. So what secrets might be hidden behind these strange strangers? I think the structure of this book is somewhat similar to Ondaatje's another novel, The Cat's Table. The first half of the story is about Nathaniel's teenage years, about how he navigates boarding school, skips classes, and eventually gets transferred. And he takes on various odd jobs, like working at the basement of a hotel, and becomes entangled in this dangerous work of greyhound smuggling with the daughter. And he encounters different people and experiences his first love. All of these shape his personality and would profoundly influence the rest of his life. And that is why when an unexpected event caused him to lose contact with these people, Nathaniel said he felt abruptly distanced from the world he had belonged to. In certain ways, it felt like a greater loss than when my mother had gone away. I'd lost my youth. I was unmoored. Then years later, like Michael in the cast table, Nathaniel as an adult seeks to understand the things that his younger self overlooked or failed to comprehend. Nathaniel becomes an intelligence officer, albeit a relatively low-ranking one, and he sees it as an opportunity to uncover clues that might help him understand what his mother was doing during the war, why she disappeared for several years after the war, and what led to her mysterious death. Through the fragments he uncovers, he gradually pieces together a picture of his mother's life. But for those who haven't read the book yet, I won't spoil too much of the plot. But what impressed me most about this novel is its unique perspective on war. It is a story about the spies, but I wouldn't necessarily characterize it as a spy thriller because it's not really about the adventures of the spy. It actually focuses more on the spy's family and the relationship with the son and the daughter. So through the story of this family, we see how the war can leave lasting scars both physically and psychologically on generations of people. And also, like The English Patient, Warlight explores this moral complexity of war and the question of whether there is ever an absolutely just side in the war. It mentions the hasty, determined destructions of evidence by all sides after the war, while fragments of truths remained among families or in villages that had been almost wiped off the map. And also, the retaliations and acts of revenge back and forth devastated small villages, leaving further grief in their wake. They were committed by as many sides as there were ethnic groups across the newly liberated map of Europe. So Nathaniel's mother gets entangled in this chaotic aftermath. And although she, as a spy, may have been merely passing on instructions, her actions led to the deaths of many innocent civilians who were unfairly labeled as German sympathizers. So as a result, she herself becomes a victim of this cycle of revenge. And what is even worse is that the repercussions of war, or the so-called peace, aren't confined to those directly involved. They leave lasting marks on those around them and extend to the next generation. It's no longer possible to see who held the correct moral position. There are only endless cycles of hatred and pain. And finally, I want to discuss the character Rose, Nathaniel's mother, who is also known by her code name Viola. I think she is a profoundly tragic figure. Her fate is closely linked to a man named Marshfallon, and their encounter when Rose was just 8 years old seems to have set her on a trajectory that ultimately led her into this world of espionage. However, as Nathaniel learns more about his mother's past, he begins to realize it may not have been a path built by Marshfallon at all. Perhaps such a life was what she always wanted, the journey she knew she would eventually pursue. So towards the end of the story, there is a reflection on how Rose, years later, chooses to return to the house she inherited. She accepted it not just as safety or assurance, but as fate. Even that loud noise from the wooden floor. And the realization of this shook me. It was built in the 1830s. She would open a door and find herself in her grandmother's life. She could witness the generations of women in their labors with a husband's visit now and then, and child after child, cry after cry, wood fire after wood fire, the banister smoothed from 100 years of touch. Years later, I would come across a similar awareness in the work of a French writer. I thought about it some nights till it almost hurt, saw myself preceded by all those women in the same bedrooms, the same twilight. She had witnessed her mother in such a role when her father was at sea or in London returning only on weekends. This was the inheritance she had come back to, the prior life she had run from. She was once more back in a small repeating universe that included few outsiders. A family of thatchers working on the roof, the postman, or Mr. Malachite arriving with sketches for the greenhouse he was building. Well, I think Rose's involvement in espionage can be seen as a radical departure from the life that is mapped out for her, a life that she saw her mother live. And by choosing a path of danger and uncertainty, she might have been seeking to define her own identity outside of this traditional roles assigned to women in their family. But the fact that she eventually returns to this inherited life, albeit briefly before her death, probably suggests an ongoing internal conflict between her sense of duty or destiny and her desire for autonomy and adventure. That being said, I still have some questions about Ondaatje's narrative choices because it seems to me that Rose is the central figure in this novel because everything that happens in the family is connected to her, and the secrets that Nathaniel seeks as an adult are ultimately his mother's secrets, right? However, the story, the entire story is told through Nathaniel's perspective, which leaves us with limited insight into his mother's true thoughts and motivations. So I'm thinking why we don't have access to the mother's perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts and interpretations on this. Please do not hesitate to share them in the comments below. And that's all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.